Coming up on this week's show, Lisa is here with book recommendations, and we remember author, publisher, and GRL organizer Ethan Day.
This is the Big Gay Fiction Podcast, the show for avid readers and passionate fans of gay romance fiction. Each week, we bring you exclusive author interviews, book recommendations, and explore the latest in gay pop culture.
Welcome to episode 163 of the Big Gay Fiction Podcast. I'm Jeff from JeffAdamsWrites.com, and with me, as always, is my co-host and the husband that I am thankful for, Will Knauss. This episode of the podcast is brought to you in part by our remarkable group of supporters on Patreon. A big thanks this week to Rob for joining us. We'll have more information on how you can join all of our patrons in just a few moments. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. And welcome everyone who is listening. We are glad you are joining us once again for another episode of the podcast. We want to wish everyone in the U.S. a happy Thanksgiving. This episode is going out on Monday, but Thursday is right around the corner. I hope you've taken your turkeys out of the freezer.
Right? Unless you have a magical turkey like ours that apparently can go stay in the freezer.
We bought a magic turkey this year.
It cooks in a bag, comes right out of the freezer, pops right into the oven.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice how that just takes care of itself.
So hopefully you are spending time with those you love and appreciate and are truly thankful for.
Yes, indeed. We want to take some time up here in the front of the show to talk about what's been in the community's mind this week. We found out last Sunday, just hours after we recorded last week's show, actually, that Ethan Day had passed away. Ethan, of course, is, as you mentioned in the upfront, he's an author with many books that he has written, along with several that he's co-written with Jeffrey Knight. He was a publisher for a while. He and Jeff had started Wild City Press. And, of course, he is also one of the founding organizers of Gay Romlet. And, of course, many of us saw him just not even a month ago at Gay Romlet in Portsmouth. And it was certainly a shock to everyone in the community that news had come that he had suddenly passed away. I have never seen Facebook come together in such a way to honor somebody that we all knew. The outpouring of love and support that was on Facebook through all of last week, honestly, was amazing and so great to see the community come together to remember him. What are your thoughts?
Well, as you mentioned before, when it came to social media, once everyone was kind of finished expressing their shock and grief, I was kind of heartened. It made me feel good to see everyone posting so many wonderful pictures with Ethan. So many happy, smiling faces, and so many genuinely happy memories as well.
Yeah, that was incredible to see, because Ethan was always smiling, even in the middle of Gay Romlet when he was running around playing host, playing organizer. He was always smiling because I think he genuinely loved what he did. And he expressed that a little bit when we had the GRL gang on the show a couple years ago, talking about why they did Gay Romlet. It struck me, one of the things that you've said coming off of Gay Romlet this year is that we have the tendency to run around and be like, oh, hi, nice to see you. We need to catch up because now I've got to go over here to do this thing. We were very lucky to be able to spend some minutes with Ethan at the 80s costume party this year. We tend to stay on the periphery, as anybody who's been to a Gay Romlet party and run into us knows. We usually hang out in the corner, watch the crowd do its thing. But this year, Ethan came over to our table. We also had Tracy Ward hanging out with us for a little bit at the table. And we just got to chat about the conference as it had played out and just about life in general. One of the extended moments that we had with Ethan and Tracy was discussing Xanadu, the 1980s something movie. Will was in a Xanadu t-shirt, and we found out that Tracy she knew of the movie but had never seen it. And we actually huddled up at this table in the corner and watched on YouTube a good part of the bonkers roller skating finale. Ethan loves Xanadu, I think, about as much as we did, actually. And we got to kind of have a little moment over that, as well as the group who dressed as Jim in the hologram. So I'm glad we got that final moment. I'm truly just shocked that he has passed away, and it's going to be interesting to see just how the community kind of rallies afterwards. There is a GoFundMe that has happened that we'll put a link to in the show notes that is out there to help his family both with the funeral arrangements as well as to make sure that the writing that he has done continues to be out in the world for all to see, so that we can all, spend a moment with Ethan at any time through his books. And we've also seen this week that Jeff Knight also plans to finish off the Crazy Like a Fox series, I believe is what that series is called. It's definitely the Fox series that they co-wrote together, because they were working on one final book. So that, he has said, will also come out sometime in 2019. So thanks to everybody who's been out there remembering Ethan over the past week. And Ethan, you will certainly be missed.
In The Hockey Player's Heart, the feel-good gay romance by Jeff Adams and Will Knaus, hockey star Caleb Carter returns to his hometown to recover from an injury. He never expects to run into his one-time crush at a grade school fundraiser. Seeing Aaron Price hits him hard, like being checked into the boards. The attraction is still there, even after all these years, and Caleb decides to make a play for the school teacher. You miss 100% of the shots you never take, right? Aaron has been burned by love before and can't imagine what a celebrity like Caleb could possibly see in a guy like him. Their differences are just too great. But as Aaron spends more time with Caleb, he begins to wonder if he might have what it takes to win The Hockey Player's Heart. Get The Hockey Player's Heart in ebook, paperback, or as an audiobook performed by me, Vince Sterling, wherever you buy books.
This past weekend, we actually had an opportunity to go to the movies and see one of those awesome Fathom events that they always talk about. This one was for a London musical called Everybody's Talking About Jamie. This is about a 16-year-old boy who wants to be a drag queen. And it's based on a documentary, a BBC documentary from a few years back called Jamie, Drag Queen at 16. The musical is exactly what it sounds like it is. You've got a 16-year-old boy who goes to school in a small town, I believe it was Sheffield, and he wants to be a drag queen. He loves wearing his mom's shoes. That's kind of where it seems to start. And one day after school, he wanders into a shop that is managed by a drag queen and gets himself outfitted and ends up with a gig at a local drag club that unfortunately his mates from school choose to also go to because word's gotten out that he's going to do it. And as you can imagine, there's a little bit of bullying going on. There's also a plot where his mom, who is extremely supportive and awesome, tends to hide from him that his dad, who is that she's divorced from, really doesn't want to see him anymore because he is gay. And when he actually goes to his dad to tell him about the show, that does not go well at all. But Jamie perseveres, actually gets to go to the prom in a dress, and this whole show just gave you all of the good feels, even as some of the rough parts happened. It reminded me sort of a little bit Kinky Boots, a little bit Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. I adored everything about this. What did you think?
When it comes to everybody's talking about Jamie, I think we've seen these sort of coming of age stories before. So that's not precisely fresh or original. But what is fresh and original is this particular production's take on the subject matter. The music is wonderful. The production is wonderful. Everyone in the cast is actually quite exceptional. And it takes this essentially what is sort of a movie of the week scenario and really infuses it with heart and fun and joy. I hadn't actually even heard of this show before.
I hadn't either.
It kind of came across my news feed on social media as a commercial for Fathom Events, and I'm just like, oh, maybe we should check this out. So that's what we did, and we are very glad that we went to the movies to go see this.
Yes. John McCrae, who is playing Jamie, was just a ball of energy. He was amazing. His vocals were amazing. His choreography, the boy is so limber. Oh my God. I don't think I was ever that limber at any age.
You know.
Oh! Yeah, but he's right, though. Josie Walker, who plays his mom, also has some standout moments. She gets, I think she has the 11 o'clock number with her big song that really lays out how she feels about her son. But yeah, it was amazing. All things Fathom events seem to come back around at some point. So, if you watch for Fathom events at your local theater, keep an eye out for it. This show still runs in London. It's still a West End hit. And John McCrae is actually still in the role through near the end of January of 2019. There's also a cast recording that's available on iTunes and all the usual outlets. So certainly highly recommend everybody's talking about Jamie. Now, you have a book for us this week by someone we've got coming up as a guest on the show in a couple weeks.
Oh, wait, now you've spoiled it. It's not a secret anymore. Not that we keep secrets. Yes, author Silvia Violet will be coming on the show in a couple of weeks, and I was very happy to read her book Chance at Love this past week. Chance is a young guy. He's a grad student, and the cute meat of the story happens on board a plane in first class. This is Chance's first time flying first class, so he's a bit excited and giddy, and he sits next to a guy named Darren, who is an incredibly handsome, hot, rich daddy type. And at first, Darren isn't sure what to make of this bubbly, energetic young guy, but over the course of the flight, they get to talking and then get to know one another, and there's definite chemistry there. But once the flight is over, so is the possibility of their relationship. Fast forward a couple of weeks where they have a second cute meet. This is a romance, after all. Darren and Chance run into one another at a gala for the local LGBT center. And Chance isn't going to let this second chance get away from him. He manages to pull Darren aside, and they have an assignation in a supply closet, which is funny and incredibly sexy at the same time.
I like that you've used the word assignation.
$10 word, check. Okay. So from there begins their relationship, and I think what's interesting about Chance at Love is that it's a pretty... I struggle to think of the correct word. It's a very straightforward romance. And that was exactly what I was looking for this week. I wanted a nice feel-good book that wasn't going to, be all, funky and angsty. So that's what I got with Chance at Love, and I really appreciated that. It's a pretty straightforward romance and story. Once they begin their relationship, they're both pretty tentative about it because of, for one thing, the age difference. There's about 18 years between the two of them. And plus, where they sit on the social ladder. But the more time that they spend together, such as Darren visits Chance at an equine therapy center. Chance grew up in Texas, so he loves horses, and he volunteers time at this equine center. And once they get to know one another and who they really are, not just like kind of the surface stuff like, oh, you're old, oh, I'm young. We have... Once they get past that, they know they're really into one another. Unfortunately, they hit a bump on the road when Darren asked Chance to be his plus one at an extremely ritzy gala. Because that's essentially what Darren does. He comes from an incredibly wealthy family, and he's the one who manages the money, and essentially his full-time job is finding ways to give it away.
Okay.
That's his job.
That's a nice job.
It is. It's pretty cool. So things do not go well at this gala, and Chance finally decides that it's not meant to be. They're just too too different. The differences are too vast. So he runs home to Texas, and Darren finally decides to go all in and, prove that this is what he wants, most definitely, and the differences don't matter. It's what they actually genuinely feel for one another. And so he does the grand gesture and flies to Texas, and they reunite, and it's all feel good, happy, schmoopy times, which I really appreciated. So
Feel good, happy, schmoopy times. That's a good book quote right there.
So while the book is, a pretty, as romances go, it's a pretty straight line from beginning to end, a traditional, narrative romance arc, and there's not a lot of complications. What I really liked about this book is that over the course of the story, when the two characters are getting to know one another, it's very real, it's very genuine. They just do normal date type things, and they're two nice guys who really like each other, and it's just nice. It just felt nice.
I like the idea of what you said with essentially two cute meets, because you get that one random moment on the plane, and then you get the more in-depth when they show up at the same place for that event. So cool. Yeah.
So I highly recommend Chance at Love by Silvia Violet, and as Jeff mentioned, we're going to have her on the podcast in a couple of weeks, which I'm really, we did the interview a day or two ago, and it's a really good one. I'm really happy with it, and I can't wait for you all to hear it.
It's going to be there.
It's good.
So I've done a couple books over the last few weeks as well. I went back to Layla Reyne, who I think is well established now that I adore her books. I picked up Craft Brew, which is the second book in her new Trouble Brewing series. And of course, well, I adored it. Do I need to say anything else about it, really?
Probably not, but go ahead. What's it about?
So this continues. This trilogy, of course, focuses on kidnap and rescue expert Cameron Byrne and U.S. District Attorney Dominic Price. This time out, we're essentially continuing with things that we've learned in the first book. So Dominic continues to deal with pressures being put on him because of his father's bad business dealings that have put him significantly in debt with some really bad people. But that kind of bubbles under the surface in this book because most of the focus on this is with Cam and his family. Cam has to go home from back to Boston from San Francisco when he learns that his mom is in the hospital with some severe heart conditions. And while he's there, he finds that he's also kind of ends up helping the local police department that he used to work with the case of a missing girl. And this actually brings a lot of things back home for Cam because his sister, when he was young and growing up, disappeared, and he's blamed himself for years on this. He was supposed to go with his big brother to pick her up from the library, and they opted to make her walk home alone because they had other things to do, and she never came home. And so that's been a big riff in the family for decades now. So not only is he dealing with having to help the local PD, but it's also dealing with all the feelings about this case, which it turns out it is the same person who kidnapped his sister years ago who has done this latest kidnapping and has been doing these kidnappings for years. Dominic eventually comes out to help Cam with the case. And so now there's this extra layer that Cam's never come out to his parents as bisexual. And now he really wants Dominic to comfort him and to take care of him, and yet have to keep space between them around the family so that they don't catch on. So there is a lot of stuff going on here. Layla, she does so good with her main characters, doing the push-pull between them, and here you really wonder if they're going to survive being at home, being around Cam's parents, and dealing with everything around the family. And at the same time, when they get these moments when they're alone, their chemistry pops so much. And on the suspense side of the spectrum here, you've got I don't know how she does it. I just really want to study her books and how she builds the suspense, because I was like, part of this I listened to on a plane, and I was like gripping the armrests because it was like, oh my God, what's about to happen here? It was so, I felt like I was watching a movie too, because she wrote it so vividly that I could just see the whole thing in my brain. If you're into romantic suspense at all and you're not reading Layla's books, you really should be. I know the third book of this is coming out in early 2019, and it will not get here fast enough so that we can see how all this stuff sorts itself out. So I highly recommend Craft Brew from Layla Reyne and the entire Trouble Brewing series so far. I kept going in romantic suspense this week. This one I picked up because Joel Leslie messaged me and said, you should read this. And he was 100% right, of course. He's never led me wrong with a book so far. Hidden in Darkness is from a new-to-me author, Alice Winters. And of course, I did the audiobook for this because it is from Joel, who's also recently released the second book in this series. I should add, also came out, I believe, this past week even.
Yeah.
In Hidden in Darkness, we find Lane and Felix. Lane is a police officer who's been undercover with some really, really nasty people. In fact, the opening chapter here is Lane escaping from where he's been held. He manages to get out of his bonds and escape from this building. He's extremely injured, and he's been blinded at the same time, so the escape is not easy. And what she did, I'll particularly focus on this opening chapter here. The way that she did this opening chapter from Lane's POV and getting out and not being able to see was quite extraordinary. I really appreciated the writing in that chapter in particular. The rest of the book basically comes from Felix's point of view, and Felix has been hired to essentially be Lane's caregiver as he comes to grips with having to navigate the world now as a blind man. Most of his other injuries are now fixed. He's recovered. That's a better way to put that. Fixed. So Felix has come in to help him navigate his house, make sure he eats, and is taken care of. These two are oil and water from the very beginning. Felix is happy. He's bouncy. He wants to do this job right and take care of this man. And Lane wants none of it. He's very proud. He wants to get on his own. He's already been through a couple of caregivers before Felix gets here. But Felix is having none of it. He's there to do a job, and he wants to do that job well. And he will put Lane in his place when necessary to do that job. But Felix is also a bit of a snooper, and very soon finds out that Lane is a cop. He's got a badge and a safe and a gun in a safe. And he very firsthand finds out how bad these people were, because on his way back from the grocery store one evening, he is pulled into an alley and beaten up because these people want to get at Lane. And what ends up and happens in this book is they end up essentially working the case together because they have to kind of go on the run to get away from these people who keep coming after them. I don't know. I can't imagine being in Felix's shoes trying to help the guy who knows how to be the police officer who can't see getting through all these scenarios. But then Felix kind of gets into it, and he ends up making stuff up as he goes. He's like, well, I think we could go do this. And he'll just go off before Lane can respond to the plan. And then he finds out he's in kind of over his head a little bit. And as they pull themselves out of the scenario and Lane kind of goes, you need to calm down and stop doing this. And then Felix goes, I know, but then they'll all go off and do it again. I was so into this, and especially the chemistry between Felix and Lane. There's a little bit of a May December going on there. I think they're about 10 to 12 years age difference between them as well. And as they both initially kind of come together as just like almost a one-off hookup, two people kind of there and just, getting together. And as they really evolve to care for each other and Felix genuinely wants to help Lane, and Lane gets to the point where he can let that happen and let himself fall in love. I loved it, and I'm so glad that Joel put this in front of me. I'm definitely going to pick up the second in the series to see what goes on next between Lane and Felix. And happy to say, projecting into 2019, that we actually get to have Alice on the show in early 2019. So I'm very excited to talk to her about this series in just a few weeks. So yeah, Hidden in Darkness, Alice Winters. Pick that one up if you want some romantic suspense in your life.
Now, when Joel originally recommended this book to us, he told us to, if I remember correctly, ignore the cover and the title. The title suggests something much darker and angstier, as well as the cover. It's practically all black. Do you feel that was a correct assessment? The book is a little bit lighter and different than its packaging might imply.
I will say that the audiobook cover, which is slightly different than the ebook paperback, I think the audiobook cover is more suggestive of what the tone is, because the especially the audiobook cover, to me, it's a romantic suspense cover in my mind. And Hidden in Darkness, especially once you read the blurb, it all kind of clicks together.
Yeah.
For what it means.
Yeah. Cool.
So, yes.
Okay. If you are interested in purchasing any of the books we have just mentioned, all you have to do is go to biggayfictionpodcast.com and check out the show notes page. That is where we have all the little linky-doos so that you can purchase whatever we just talked about. Now, you can also help support the Big Gay Fiction Podcast with a monthly pledge through Patreon. Your pledge every month helps pay for the cost of producing and distributing this show. Now, fans who pledge at the silver and gold levels, you have the exclusive opportunity to ask questions of some of our upcoming guests. That's always cool. You have an updated list.
I will have an updated list that actually goes out this week. I've been booking a lot of people over the last week or so for first of the year shows.
Fantastic. Lots to look forward to in January.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of good stuff. Also, all patrons have the option to have a personalized thank you sent directly to them. Also, any month that our pledges cover our monthly production costs, which is essentially every single month that we've done this.
It is, yeah.
We have really wonderful, devoted listeners and fans. So we've been able to do a special bonus episode, especially for our patrons, every single month. And as soon as we are finished with this recording, we're going to record the Patreon bonus episode for November.
Yes.
Now, if you would like to get in on all the good action and check out what those bonus Patreon episodes are all about, all you have to do is go to biggayfictionpodcast.com. You can find the information there, or you can also go directly to our Patreon page. That is at patreon.com/biggayfictionpodcast.
Want to hang out with us between shows? Check us out on Facebook. You never know what we might post. News about book sales, bonus video content, and maybe even a live broadcast or two. Like us today at facebook.com/biggayfictionpodcast and see what we get up to next.
So as we mentioned at the top of the show, we've got Lisa from the Novel Approach back to talk about some books that she's recommending right now. She's also got a holiday title for us inside of this particular batch of recommendations.
Looking forward to that.
And she also takes a moment to talk about Ethan Day as well. I'm excited, as always, to welcome Lisa back to the podcast. Happy Thanksgiving week.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving week to you, too.
So you've got some good books for us, because you gave me the list before we started, and I'm super excited to hear about the Gregory Ashe book, because I've been hearing a lot about it from several areas.
You know, the Hazard and Somerset series. Gregory just released the sixth book in the series, Criminal Past, and this particular book sort of wraps up the overall story arc of this first chapter in Emery Hazard and John Henry Somerset's story. You know what? I don't see any reason why every single person should not read this series. It's really one of the best mystery police procedural series I have ever had the pleasure of reading. The overall arc follows Emory Hazard as he comes back to this smallish town in Missouri, and I always am fearful that I pronounce this wrong because I'm sure I do. Waredawa, Missouri, and he kind of he's confronting his past when he comes back to this small town where he was bullied as the only gay kid, or the only out gay kid in high school. There was some incredibly violent things that occurred, particularly with his first love, Jeff Langham. And so everything is kind of starting to come full circle, or everything is definitely coming full circle in this last book, in this particular the part of their lives, John Henry's and Emory's lives. And it's just, it not only addresses John Henry's and Emory's relationship and their past, which is kind of influencing their present relationship right now in some not so great ways for John Henry. Lots of guilt there, lots of reconciling some of his behaviors and his fears and his doubts of the fact that, you know, Emory can really, really love him and be committed to this relationship. But on top of all of that, there is political corruption, and there's murder, and there's intrigue, and there's, you know, drugs and white supremacists and sex trafficking. And it's just so amazing how he brought all of these threads together in this final novel. And it's a long one. It's almost 600 pages long. So he really, really
that's
goes,
epic.
Yeah, he really, really goes all out in this one. And every single sentence and paragraph just is so integral to everything that's come before it and everything that's going to happen when he decides to come back and revisit these two characters in the next part of their lives. In the meantime, he's actually going to be getting back to one of my other favorite series of his, which is a young adult series, the Hollow Folk series. And I think I touched on that in one of the other podcasts, that he's going to be revisiting Vi Elliott, and I think that this is going to be the final book in that trilogy. He's going to kind of wrap up that story, and then I heard that he's also starting a new mystery series. So he's got some great things coming down the pipe. But for now, you know, Criminal Past is just this entire series. As I was reading it, you think, okay, where is this all going? But there is such an amazing method to his madness through all of these different threads and storylines and little things that you think that, how is that significant? And then all of a sudden they're absolutely integral. And there is such a beautiful, beautiful, kind of a redemption moment, a full circle redemption moment in the story that is so beautifully subtle for John Henry and Emory at a hugely critical action danger moment in the story that is just, you know, you read it and you think, wow, that's kind of genius there, Mr. Ashe. You really had this plotted out so well. And so, yeah, so Gregory Ashe's Hazard and Somerset series, if you get yourself anything for Christmas, buy these books. They're just so phenomenal, so phenomenal. The series and the story and the characterization and the revelations and just, yeah, the intrigue and corruption. And it's all really, really fabulous stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to add it because I just keep, the last few weeks, I just keep hearing from different areas how good this series is. So
yeah, I think that it's a series that The buzz over it is just, it really started to take over. I see every so often I'll be flipping through Facebook and I'll see somebody talking about the one of the books or about the series, and I'm like, yeah, I'm right there with you, right there with you. It's just really, really fantastic, really fantastic. And he's such a lovely person too. So yeah, it's great series.
So what else have you got for us?
My next series, completely kind of flipping gears here, is a series called Dark in the Night. It's by a wife and wife writing team called Kelley York and Rowan Altwood. And they have written an absolutely stunningly phenomenal historical Gothic horror series. The first book, A Light Amongst Shadows, takes place in a boarding school in England, and the boarding school, of course, is your typical Gothic horror sort of setting. And I mean, there's ghosts and there's murder and there's just intrigue. And the two characters, James Spencer and William Escher, are introduced. They're in what we would kind of in America call their junior year of high school. And the way that Kelley and Rowan not only bring them together is just extremely romantic, which sounds weird when people are being murdered by ghosts, but but then their pasts are, and I'm not spoiling this because you can see this in the blurbs. Their pasts are very tragic in their families are just, their families are horrible. William is addicted to laudanum, so he's got a drug addiction, and James is coping with the after effects of sexual abuse. And so these two characters are immensely flawed and yet incredibly endearing and lovely. And so Kelley and Rowan just do a fantastic job of not only engaging the readers with the characters, but then immersing us in the descriptive writing of the story. Every single encounter with the ghosts is just so beautifully laid out, and it's so atmospheric to the point where you find yourself almost like gasping and holding your breath, because you get literal jump scares almost, when you're reading these passages, and it's just really, really beautiful. And then the second book is more new adult, so it's James and William post-graduation, and they work for a medium, a spiritualist. And so they've been assigned the task of going to investigate a murder in this idyllic pastoral sort of English countryside estate that ends up not being quite so idyllic and pastoral, and the Walking Dead sort of atmosphere, and the summoning of this evil, and it's absolutely a stunning series. So if you like historical, if you like Gothic horror, if you like beautifully written, absolutely just enveloping atmosphere in writing, I can't recommend the Dark as the Night series enough. Kelley York and Rowan Altwood, they are absolutely talented and wonderful storytellers.
It really sounds like a great book just to curl up in like your favorite chair next to a fireplace and just get immersed into that.
Yeah. You know, if you're brave enough, you read it with the lights off. But it's just really just came out of, well, I'll tell you, Jacqueline Osborne, who is another one of my favorite authors. I saw her recommend the book on Facebook. So it was just one of those things where I was like, I'll give it a try. And now I was absolutely blown away by it. So it's a great series. Great series.
And of course, we got Thanksgiving coming up this week, which means, Christmas right around the corner.
Well, it's been Christmas since Halloween, right?
It really has. If you're watching the Hallmark Channel, that's all it's been since Halloween.
Yeah.
You've got a Christmas story ready for some holiday reading.
I do. Author Leta Blake has written a Christmas story, and it's actually book one in a series, a planned series of Christmas stories. And the book is called Mr. Frosty Pants, which is just delightful. And it's kind of a best friends to ex-best friends to romantic lovers story, all just second chances and the questioning of, can you go home again? And it's a story of letting go and holding on and finding your courage to take risks and take chances. And it's a story of hope in the end. It's very much a story of hope. Two men, they're in their early 20s, Casey Stevens and Joel Vreeland, and it's an opposite sides of the track story. Casey comes from the wealthy family, parents who are very concerned with appearances and kind of a social climbing. Snobs, and Joel comes from a home with an abusive, just horrible father, and he tries so hard to be the faithful son and the good son, and it's a story of just them trying to find their way back to each other, and Casey's tenacity and Joel's doubts and insecurities, and Casey's just persistence in convincing him, that yes, there were mistakes made, and yes, I left for college 3.5 years ago and never contacted you after I left, but there were mitigating circumstances, and so it's really a story of hope at the holidays that I think Leta just did a fabulous job. Bringing all the warmth and the sentiment around the holidays into a very believable story of rekindling a love that did not even seem possible to Casey. He was willing to rekindle the friendship because he wasn't aware that Joel was even gay. And so it is just confession and communion over their feelings for each other that they couldn't speak about when they were young. And so it's just such a beautiful story. Really, really good. Mr. Frosty Pants. It will give you all of those warm, magical holiday feels and smile at the end.
That sounds awesome. And I do love the title.
Yeah, it is.
Just inspired.
Yeah. Well, and Joel is the Mr. Frosty Pants. He's kind of trying to freeze Casey out because he's very hurt and angry still at Casey's perceived abandonment when he left for college. So yeah, Mr. Frosty Pants. It's really cute and it fits and it's fun.
Excellent. Now, of course, shifting gears a little bit, this past week we lost someone very dear to the community, as we all learned that Ethan Day passed away. Will and I spoke earlier in the episode about and just remembering the man a little bit. I know you wanted to just take a few minutes to remember him as well.
You know what? This is I think one of the most shocking losses that we've experienced in this community. Obviously, we are no stranger to the loss of friends and authors in the community. But I think that Ethan's loss was roundly one of the most tragic losses that we have ever experienced in the community. I think to a person, anyone who was even slightly acquainted with him or someone who considered him a best friend, the one thing that you hear about him was he had such an amazing sense of humor, and it was self-deprecating, and he was warm, and he was kind, and he was gentle. And one of my favorite memories of his examples of his sense of humor was a blog that I was reviewing for many years ago, and we did an interview with Ethan, and of course you welcome Ethan. It's great to have you here. And his reply was, "It's great to be here. Usually I don't get that kind of a welcome unless someone's trying to get in my pants." So that was just Ethan's again, that self-deprecation. Everything was just so fun and funny. And I think that, one of my biggest regrets is every year we would always say we need to make plans to sit down and have a meal together. We need to sit down and at least have a cup of coffee together or a drink together. And we never found those moments because he was so involved with GRL and so impassioned and so committed to everything going well. And so you would see Ethan here, and then you would see him here, and you would smile at him in passing in the hallway, and those very rare moments when you actually found time to stand and talk to him or sit and talk to him were always so special. And I think one of the things that was always so special to him was when he would hear people talking after GRL about what an amazing time it was, and how much fun we had, and how special it was. And I wish we could all go back to Portsmouth and get a do-over and let him. Now I'm going to start crying. Let him know how special he was to us and to this community, and how much we loved him. Mm-hmm. He's going to be missed. He's leaving a big hole in the community, and there are going to be a lot of people who miss him for many years to come, but he'll never be forgotten. We'll always have his words. Right. We'll always have At Piper's Point, and we'll always have his Summit City series, and we'll always have his characters who were quirky and flawed and funny. And we'll always know that a little bit of Ethan was in each and every one of those characters.
For sure. Well said.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing that interview moment that you had with him too. That is so Ethan.
Yeah. It was Ethan always tried to keep things lighthearted and fun, and he succeeded so frequently, and that came through in his books.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing these books to get people through the winter time.
Yeah, and thank you for always giving me just a few minutes of your time. I always appreciate it.
Absolutely. I mentioned at the end of last week's show, when we talked about that you were coming on the show, that you always add to my TBR every single time, because you come with these books that sound so incredible, and you've, of course, done it yet again.
Well, I'm always glad to deal. always glad to deal in the fiction.
Absolutely. Well, Lisa, we wish you and your family a great Thanksgiving and a great holiday season, and look forward to having you back shortly after the first of the year.
Thank you so much. And same to you. Happy holidays.
So speaking of the book recommendations that we get on this show, we mentioned Joel kind of put me onto Alice Winters. I've taken the leap that Lisa provided as well, and since I talked to her a couple days ago, I have started Gregory Ashe's Hazard in Somerset series back with book 1. So I'm sure I'll be talking about that in an upcoming show as well, because already I'm like 5 chapters in, and I'm already like, oh my God, this is so good.
Awesome. Okay, guys, I think that'll do it for this week's episode. Coming up next week in episode 164, Danny from Love Bites. She's going to join us with some of her book recommendations as well.
Yeah, always look forward to talking to her, and I'm excited to hear what she's going to give us for Rex this time.
All right, everyone, remember, no matter where life takes you, the journey will always be sweeter when you have a book. Until next time, everyone, please keep turning those pages and keep reading.
For detailed show notes and links to everything discussed in this episode, go to biggayfictionpodcast.com. New episodes are available every Monday at all major podcast distributors. You can also find us on YouTube. I'm Derek McLean. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.